All right, glad to have you back. Now, let's continue the conversation on another issue. What very important actually has to do with economic development too. Since 2000, Africa has been growing steadily with an average GDP of well over 5%, making it the world's second fastest growing region after Asia. With the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, the continent suffered its worst recession in more than 50 years in 2020, as its GDP declined by 2.1%, but it expected to increase by 3.4% in 2021. With Africa's macroeconomic fundamentals have been being weakened by the pandemic, the World Bank has pledged to boost development in the continent in the next 5 years with $150 billion to cushion the effect of the pandemic on the continent. According to the World Bank, a large portion of the fund will be through grants and long-term zero-interest rate loans for International Development Association, which continues to provide strong positive net flows to Africa, as well as overcome other challenges faced in the continent, such as access to COVID-19 vaccines, inequality, and debt sustainability. Well, to discuss this, I said earlier, a senior lecturer from the Lagos Business School, Dr. Bongo Adi, joins me now via Skype. Good afternoon, Dr. Adi.
Good afternoon, sir.
It's good to see you today. Thank you very much for your time.
Great to be with you this afternoon.
Yes, 150 billion in another 5 years. Before now, 200 billion had already been spent, well, across a decade on the African continent. What do you see? What's the interest, or what do you think World Bank really intends to achieve before we now talk about the debt angle of it?
Anyway, of course, the World Bank has been focused on development aid. I think that has been its mandate from the origin. Lest we forget, the original name of World Bank is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. That was the name that was tagged to it at inception. It's one of the Bretton Woods institutions that were created after the Second World War in 1945. The Bretton Woods, together with IMF, essentially and primarily to revitalize the economies, the war-battered economies of Europe. And of course, after that, in the post-independence period, so African countries also came into the purview of World Bank, development aid lending. So I think that is their primary mandate, to spur development, tackle poverty in especially third world countries, and that's what they've been doing all over over the years. So, of course, these are all lending, so they are not, there are some granting aid, of course, there are some concessionary loans, but the World Bank operates as the usual bank. They will also have to collect back their money when it comes due.
So now these monies will come in form of grants, long-term loans from IDAs. We're talking about Nigeria wanting to even borrow more already. Now, what do you make of the channels? Grants, long-term loans from IDAs. Is that the way to go at this very critical time as countries try to recover from the effects of COVID-19?
Yes, COVID-19 was an unforeseen, some people refer to it as a black swan event. It wasn't quite in the forecast, it wasn't in the picture, it just happened. And then it crippled not just Nigeria, not just Africa, but entire global economy. And right now, as production, the factories, the machines, begin to pump back to action. So it's going to take a long while before, things get back to the level they were before the pandemic. So meaning that so many capital has fallen into disuse, assets in disuse. Of course, the deleterious impact on human capital cannot go, without being mentioned, So that is also massive. Put all this together, so you have human capital, you have fiscal infrastructure, physical capital affected by the pandemic. So it requires a huge infusion of capital to reactivate all the systems, the productive systems, so that the world economy can bounce back. So, of course, in so many countries, they've had to dip their hands into their reserves to get the economies going. For countries without such, they don't have that. So the only alternative left is to look for where to get the necessary capital to refinance their economic systems, their financial, their assets, so that they can become productive again. So is it a way to go? Of course it is. So especially when we look at the different classes, the grants, the concessions, and the long-term loans. Of course, that is what is better than approaching the commercial lending system, because that will make it more expensive. And of course, why the World Bank lending it would be preferred, is that there are very rigorous processes, that beneficiaries have to meet before they can access those loans. So over the years, I think the World Bank has switched to what they call output-based lending. So output-based lending means that you have to go a very rigorous scrutiny, evaluation of the funds and all of the investments. So it's not just asking for money and then using it to whatever you want to do with it. But of course, we know that the World Bank has also come under criticism over the years that much of what they give in terms of either loans or grants or concessions, go back to the technical support coming from more advanced countries, in terms the people who have to do the evaluation. So when they pay the professionals, the experts, then the little is left to actually go into the real the project. So that's been a criticism that the World Bank has faced. But again, for good reason, because they want to ensure that their loans are properly channeled, not withered away by corruption, which of course is endemic in most of these third world countries. So that is the step they take to ensure that there is real fungibility in the sense that the loans, the money, the funds they put into projects actually turn into profits.
Dr. Hadi, it's also important to look at debt sustainability and also transparency, which the World Bank says will be very important and followed to the latter during the distribution of this additional 150 billion US dollars. What do you make of how we've handled funds coming in before now from the World Bank? Transparency is key for us to really get good results.
Yeah, like I said, if you're familiar with the World Bank, system, the history of World Bank interaction or lending to Africa or developing countries or Nigeria, particularly, you will know that they have had to switch, from when they gave countries loans, and then countries where it was at their disposal to disburse those funds to their priority projects. But under the current scheme, I think it is the output-based lending, which is the reason why they keep emphasizing transparency, accountability, and all of that. So there are so many, these loans are governed by several conditions. That's why they are conditioned, the so-called conditionalities, much like IMF. So you have to meet certain conditions in order to benefit from the loans. If you don't, then that means you may not actually access those loans. And sometimes there are some penalties attached as well. So we've seen even within Nigeria that some states were not able to access some World Bank provided World Bank concessions, in the past. I know I've worked with, one or two states in the Southeast. Over the period of 8 years, they were not able to access any of these World Bank funds for sanitation, for water, because they could not meet the rigor. They couldn't match the rigorous requirements, of the bookkeeping and all those, the provision of all, technical expertise in order to access such funds. So because of that, World Bank will not disburse. So if such mechanisms govern the current cycle, so we do not need to worry about the size of the loan. And like I keep saying this, Nigeria doesn't have a problem with productivity. We have a problem with productivity because productivity is low. It's not been activated. We do not have any problem with opportunities. There are huge opportunities in Nigeria that require huge infusion of funds to convert to real goods and services. So I'm not bothered about that. What we have a problem with is revenue. So, and again, if you want to build the revenue, the scale up your revenue such that you can take care of your debt, service, and all of that, then it means that you also need more money to invest. But then getting that money means that there has to be prudence in the way it is managed, in the way it's administered, ensuring that the loans are actually channeled to the right, projects managed by the right expertise. Not just putting it out there for all comers. So if we do that, if we repeat that, as has been the case with even what comes from the CBN and from other sources, then it means that it's going to be doomsday for us.
Another initiative talked about by the World Bank, we would also touch on that. He made this known, that's the chief Malpass, he made this known at the Summit of Financing of African Economies that held in France. Now, he talked about closing infrastructure gap, improving low access to carbon electricity, and expanding alternative small business finance, and of course, supporting agribusiness. What do you make of all of these initiatives, and what impact do you think this would have on economies like Nigeria?
Okay, so you mentioned the critical, what we regard as the nerve of the economy. So when you're talking about agribusiness, you're talking about agriculture, and that is the revenue for poor people. And then we have a concentration of poverty in Nigeria, where more than 80% of the population, is poor, relatively. So if you look at that, so it's very crucial to invest in agribusiness. And then, of course, that's also where we seem to have some bit of comparative advantage if we're able to process our agro products, what comes from our farms. If we're able to add some bit of value, then it will command more, attract higher price in the international market. And of course, there's huge opportunity, there's huge gap to be closed in that space. And then we have the SMEs, okay? Small and medium enterprises. And again, that is what most, more than 90% of businesses in Nigeria fall into. And that is the only way you can grow an economy if you are investing in the SMEs. So, so you can see that they're interconnected. Of course, then infrastructure. Now, having, let's say we've activated the agribusiness sector, we've activated small businesses. The next thing is the logistics network, when you call distribution, what you call distribution. Now, how do we ensure that what is produced at the farms, get to the various markets? So you have to provide the routes. That's important. You have to provide the necessary, let's say, the refrigerating system, the cold chain, which doesn't exist in Nigeria currently. And because of that, we lose so much. Okay, so much opportunities are lost because we don't have that. So why don't we have a cold chain system currently? Because we do not have the energy that will support such investment. So because we do not have that, then those investments will not come. So supposing we have, reliable energy supply across both the rural and the urban areas, people have access to affordable electricity, then of course you will see that this economy will be re-energized, and then, production will kickstart from I keep saying this, we've had the dismantling of our internal market dynamics. Okay, so there is no connection between what comes from the farms to the industries. There's no longer much connections between linkages between the rural and the urban. So all these things have been dismantled over the years, either deliberately by policy or just because of the way the system has been operating. Okay, so it is important for us to recreate those linkages, the connections that we have between the farm and the factory. So if we are not able to link this, and it's very important, then we cannot increase value, we cannot add value. And if we do not add value, we cannot play in the global value chain. And that is actually what will, rejig our exchange, the external sector. Of course, the major variable in the external sector is the exchange rate. So our exchange rate is taking a huge beating simply because, there is nothing, because of the current account, fragility. So we have a negative current account, okay, so balance, and then that is impacting negatively on our exchange rate, supposing that we're able to increase this necessary farm-factory linkage, and then we are looking at the external sector, export-driven growth, then we are sure that we'll begin to drive this economy out of where these doldrums that we found it in the past a couple of years. In fact, it has always been that, but the clement oil price had cushioned that effect, marks all these, the inefficiencies that we've been having in the system. So, but now we've been exposed because the oil covering has been removed. We've been unmarked, for who we really are. And then we've seen that we are running on empty. We don't have much. So it is time for us. So that's why I think the World Bank, because they also have their people on ground who are doing, real research, understanding what the issues are from both the rural and the urban dimension, not just the Lagos, Abuja economics who speak on TV like myself. So they are able to understand the rural challenges. And then that's why, I can see that their policies are being, tuned towards addressing the real challenges of this internal market dynamics that have been disrupted over the years.
It's always interesting. Thank you very much for you sharing your expertise with us. Senior lecturer at Lagos Business School, Dr. Bongo Adi. We really appreciate this. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, there, you've heard it from Dr. Bongo Adi there, talking about the World Bank's $150 billion to be invested across the African continent.